Good evening and welcome to the Comprehensive Plan Committee meeting. I'll call the meeting to order at this juncture, and the first order of business is election of officers that have been put off from last meeting. Are there any nominations, or where are we going? Yes.
I think we need to have a chair and vice chair or co-chairs to continue on through this process. It will get us to a place faster than not. And I would like to nominate co-chairs. I think co-chairs are appropriate for a committee like this because there's a lot of work to do. And I would like to nominate Kayla and Peter. Peter has had experience as a vice chair of this committee in the last time around. And Kayla has a lot of experience, as well as she has a lot of resources at her fingertips that she'll probably be able to use to help us on our way.
Is that a nomination or a discussion?
That is a nomination.
Okay. Is there a second?
If they're willing and able, I would second that nomination, but I would want to hear whether they're, well, we know they're able, but we want to hear if they're willing.
Yeah. Well, now that it's seconded, it's opened up for discussion.
Sure, I'll go first. I would be more than happy to serve as a co-chair. I do feel as though I have a recent working relationship with town staff, department heads. I feel that that would be good experience, and I also am very familiar with other members of the community, and I am young and able and think that I would serve well.
Yes, and I'm honored to serve as co-chair in this position. I've been in the town a long time. I'm old, and I'm retired.
Any further comments or?
That is excellent.
Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. I will turn it over to, I'm not sure which of you would like to try and run the meeting. Go ahead.
Okay, you want to start? We could certainly
Sure.
alternate.
You might have to help me a little bit. That's where
Sure.
a little bit of inexperience comes in. So, next item on the agenda is approving the minutes from our August 25th meeting.
I move approval.
Second. And then I believe we go to a vote.
Any discussion
Or
on
discussion,
or
sorry.
additions or corrections?
Yes. That was quick. That was quick, but it was, so, we have a chair and we have a co-chair. We have two co-chairs, actually, is what we have.
So I'm sorry, we're bringing Brad up to date.
Yeah, bring me up to date.
So we just elected two co-chairs, myself and Peter.
Outstanding. Okay.
Right, and now we have moved to approve the minutes from our last meeting. And we're at the discussion part. And I'm hearing none. All right, so then we move to vote. And all those in favor?
Yes.
Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And all those opposed? All right, approved. The next item.
Madam Chair, I
Oh,
do want
sorry.
to ask if I could. We skipped vice chair. Was there any desire to have a vice chair if you have two co-chairs
Well, I think we did is instead of
of the vice?
Instead of
Okay.
vice
I just
chairs,
wanted to be sure. I
co-chairs.
didn't want to miss that. If
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
co-chairs.
that's how I understood it.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
I think it was part
I
of
was trying
Frank's
to
motion.
type, so.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. I'm sorry I missed that
No,
piece.
that's okay. So the next item is all of our new business, and we're going to review the 2004 comprehensive plan.
So, Madam Chair, I'd ask, first of all, everybody had an opportunity to see the document. It's fairly detailed, and certainly a lot of compliments have to go to the writers, the consultants in the committee from 2000, 2004. And I think in reading it, it humbles me a little bit on just how much work is going to be involved in this, which is why I think there's so many components where we're going to have to draw on resources. But like was discussed at the last meeting, it means we're all going to have to take a certain amount of responsibility, because there's work that even the consultants aren't going to be able to do that we would do. And I think I made a mention at the last meeting that it's boilerplate. I think some of it is. And then the stuff that I really am interested in is the stuff that is unique to Raymond. And that's really what makes, I think, the comprehensive plan effective and go. One of the things, and I appreciate very much the information that was forwarded on the RFPs. And I think that in reading them, although some of them are pretty detailed, and I know the town has a policy which will get guidance from the town on as far as how this RFP is crafted. Certainly it's got to be something that's very transparent, and along with deadlines for applications and the like. But one thing I noticed that was a common theme, and it might be helpful for us prior to having a consultant on board, because I believe that there's a lot of work we can do even before, so that when we finally do arrive on a consultant, we'll hit the ground running. Is this consistent thread about, I think I found it in the Gray RFP specifically, and then also in the SACO, where they keep referring to the Growth Management Act, which I believe is a component that came out of its Title 30A, I believe. So, you know, I mean, as far as looking at exactly what the state requires, and the sense I'm getting is that the state may require it. It doesn't mean you necessarily comply with it. But I believe in the Gray RFP, it was made very clear that what the consultant would do would use that as one of the guiding documents for deciding basically what the basic elements of the comprehensive plan are. And I'm pretty sure that any consultant that we have that comes on board is going to say, well, you know, certainly a lot of this is going to be derived from that document. And I happen to pull it up, and it does list a lot of things that we would certainly, or we have already incorporated in the 2004 plan. But also there was a requirement that towns update their comprehensive plan every 3 years. So such things as looking, as the state includes things into the Title 30, such as planning for climate change. Obviously, that wasn't something that was really discussed in 2004. So my understanding is to stay compliant with that document, that state statute, that it has to be revisited not every decade or whatever, but it really would be revisited more like on a 2 or 3 basis. So those are my observations as far as the review and the current plan and the RFPs and the like.
So, Mr. Chair, would you like me to find that section of 30A and send it out to the members?
That'd be very helpful. I pulled it up, but it's about 9 pages.
Yeah, I can post it online.
That'd be terrific.
If one thing I did find, I did bring the planning resource list that I've begun. I'm not sure it's really anything you need right now. I have posted it on the website under comprehensive plan. But in looking at all of that, I did find that the main office for community development doesn't do anything with comp plans, which I found interesting. But there is a main planning assistance program. It has a staff of 1.
Busy person.
I will absolutely murder his last name, but Tom Miraglio, something like that. But he is very enthusiastic. He does help towns with their comp plans, and helps them to find a planner and gives some ideas of things that should be in RFPs. So he's a resource we might be able to call on. He said he'd be happy to Zoom into a meeting if that's something the committee would like at some point.
Great.
Good idea.
But other than that, that's all there is at the state, is that man of one department.
That's a testament of the times, it seems, going from a planning office of under Evan Reichert of whatever, 20, 30 people, plus or minus. Maybe it wasn't that big, but down to one.
And he also said that there are two major players in planning right now that are helping most towns with, if they go the route of having a planner. And that's North Star Planning with Ben Smith, and Musson Group with Noel Musson. And Musson Group is the one that I'd mentioned last time that the town clerk in Cutler suggested. But they actually work across the state, not just down east.
I'll just chime in. I've been working on some projects in my consulting with, and North Star has been excellent as a town planner for the town neighbors. And I've been very impressed with Ben Smith and his team.
He's the former planner
in town of
Wyndham, so he's very
10 years.
familiar with the area. And he's in New Gloucester, which is a great thing. I also have done a little bit of investigation today. I called a former planner from many years ago, now retired, who was active with the Mid-Coast Planning Agency. I don't know the precise name now. I guess maybe Council of Governments. And she gave me a name of Eric Gallant and a telephone number I didn't have a chance to call yet. And then a name that a lot of people in the planning world might recognize. Matthew Eddy, who was in Westbrook, is heading up that agency now, and she thought that he might be a good resource. And then another suggestion that I got was, maybe contact the Muskie School and see if they're going to have graduate level planning people. There may be an ability to leverage some help and support there. Likewise, I always tell St. Joseph's College they are very, very active in trying to assist the towns in any way they possibly can, and we may be able to get some assistance in data gathering and statistical analysis and things like that if you are interested in that. They've recently reached out to me with some of their students that are seeking practical work experiences. So that's what I have.
And along that line, Tom at the state has added Raymond to the list of towns that he'll get data for, statewide data and region-wide data for us that will be ready sometime late October.
Wow.
Can I have your list and I'll add it to this document?
Okay.
I can get it tomorrow.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to talk with you
No, that's
today.
Are there any other comments regarding the 2004 comprehensive plan?
One question for Sue. When you said that Tom's going to gather the data for us, when you say that, is he going to be gathering data to compare to all the household sizes and the growth? Is that the data that he's going to be looking at?
I'm
or
not
is
sure.
It,
He said it's a data set that he prepares for towns that are updating their comprehensive plans.
Okay.
And I had like a 4-minute conversation with him, so I didn't get into that level of detail.
Okay.
But it will be a starting point, or it might raise some more questions and might give us some direction for what kinds of questions you want to ask
Okay.
for surveys and whatnot, is my guess.
Is there any unique data available to us from the 2020 census? Do towns get more comprehensive information?
I don't think they've begun to release that.
They have.
They have?
I was
Okay.
able to find a few things about
Yeah,
the 2020
I haven't gotten
census
anything at the
data.
town office yet.
Some of it's a little buried and a little difficult to obtain on their website, but if you're persistent enough,
Yeah.
I find that you can find a great deal of data on there.
What's the release timetable?
Actually, it's interesting. They release various, information over the next decade, and so, as they do it. So she's way ahead of me, but I've not been contacted in any way or notified of anything. But if the website has the information, then that's great. But I think there'll be more information as time moves on through this process.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that would be a wonderful,
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's
Resource.
probably by mid-decade, they may have everything they're gonna do done,
yeah.
yeah.
What have you found, Kayla?
Well, we have a population of about 4,536. And I don't have the 2004 plan in front of me, but some things that I did note that were a little bit different was the median household income is around 71,000. Our median age is 51.8, and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that's up
Yeah.
quite a bit from the 2004 census data, so that would have been the 2000 census data we would have been
2000.
working with in 2004. The average household size is down a little bit to 2.36. I also thought it was interesting that the group that seems to have fared the least well is our elderly population. They're actually more poor than they were in 2004 or 2010.
In
2000.
in 2000
In
dollars?
2000, yes.
So
So
in
the
real dollars.
largest increase in poverty age group wise is those 75 and older in the age group of 75 to 74, which was not predicted. I believe it actually states in that 2004 comprehensive plan that they suspected that the retirement age group of people would fare the best because they would have theoretically the most stable income, but I think that
But
that's
these-
proved to be wrong.
These would be residents, year-round residents.
That's correct.
I think the folks who are not year-round residents, you know, as evidenced by the real estate market and the, you know, the people who are now, you know, taking up more of a presence here, maybe not changing their residency, but spending more time here through the pandemic. There is an element of elderly people who are doing pretty well, I think. But it's probably not the local year-round people.
I think it's explainable though. I think what happens in a town like Raymond is people opt out. They don't want to live in the house they've been in the years they've been here. They want something smaller. They can't find something here, so they're moving out and they're going to centers like in Falmouth, where they can get a place, and the future is pretty well worked out for them. And so what you get is the older people who remain here are the people that can't afford to opt out. So you're going to find that the average income of the seniors would go down just because of that. And that's not a new phenomenon. That's happened here for years. People got to a point in their lives here, there was nowhere for them to get a condo or something like that, so they had to leave. My contemporaries, most of them left over a period of 10 years. Raymond is not a place where older people find accommodations that they'd like to have here.
It's also not a place that young people find accommodations either.
That's true.
That is
That's
true.
true.
Yeah, if you're younger and just starting out, you're going to be hard pressed here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So on the median income, how did that look across you know, comparable communities or other? Last time around, of course, it was significantly higher.
I did not have the time to compare that.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. We've had so much stuff, I thought.
No, I didn't compare.
I didn't even know it was out there, so there
I
you go.
compared the 2020 data to the 2000 data that was in the
Yeah.
2004 plan.
Well, at one point, I believe we were in the top 10, but I think we slipped out of the top 10 in terms of you know, median income. But we're still, I would guess, in the top 20.
Of the state.
Possible.
Yeah.
Does that
The
take into
percentage
account
or
only
communities number?
year-round residents, or is that
That's, yeah.
people that pay
Yes.
taxes in
It
town?
would be the year-round residents. It
Natives.
would, the census focus on those who permanently reside here.
Okay.
Right.
Per capita income.
When you said top 10, did you, top 10 number or percent, top 10% of, excuse me?
Per capita income, you know,
Right, but are we
basically
in the top 10% or the top 10 in number?
top 10 in number.
Wow.
Top
Yeah.
10 towns. Yeah. I think an interesting statistic.
But we've slipped from that. I mean, that was some years ago, but I think it's still, the point, I guess, is that it's a, you know, community with a large population of people who do have a high income, I guess.
I have to be honest, I was a little surprised that that's what they said the median household data was. I personally thought it would be a little lower.
Yeah, it's pretty high for Maine.
But that also, I think, is reflected in the elderly people who are leaving. Those are the people who have a higher income, and because they have left, it would cause the average to go down.
To drop. The population numbers I find to be fairly similar to what I remember them to be in the former plan. I suppose they're stated right there in front of me, but I always have thought of Raymond around 4,300.
About 42, I think, so it's very close.
42. So we're not seeing a big kick in the census.
No, and I can't recall if we were, in that report, they have projections, and I cannot recall if we're on par for that or not. I'd have to be looking at it to review it again. That was a lot of information to absorb, 135 pages.
Just on Raymond or for the state? The 135 pages, just on Raymond?
That
or-
was our 2004 comprehensive plan, so
Oh, the
I read
plan.
through the
Okay.
entire thing. It was a lot of information to absorb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any information available about how long people have lived here? And if not, we could probably get a good guess of what that might be if we don't have it readily available.
I think that may be in some of the census data.
Yeah, that would be helpful to know also.
The 2004 plan projections for population in 2013 were about 5,300.
So we are not.
Well below that.
We're well below
So
that.
they
At that-
probably kept extending that out.
At that time, there were many, planned subdivisions, and the development environment was very active, and so that was the belief, but it didn't turn out to be the reality. So, and those, Chris can speak to that. I believe we still have, significant capacity ramped up,
There are a
ready to
number
go.
of subdivision plans that have been approved that have not been built. For instance, Rolling Brook was approved in the early 2000s, I believe, and they did phase 1, and then only recently, the last 2 or 3 years, the second phase and third phase are being built out as we speak, but they're still not completed. There's probably another 10 homes that could be built in there. And then up on Valley Road, Valley View Estates is quite a subdivision that was planned that is owned by John Chase, and that hasn't been built out at all, has not even started.
That's going to
And
be
I-
a 55 plus, I think, isn't it?
There's a certain percentage of it,
Yeah.
and I don't remember, I think it was at least 10%, but I could be wrong. I haven't visited that in quite a while, but I don't believe you'll even see that start for a while, because I believe that the developers are thinking they may want to be cautious with the way building supplies are now and the shortage of labor. So it's extremely expensive to build right now. So I don't think you're going to see any huge growth until the supply chain changes and some of these contractors that are throwing out prices that are absolutely ridiculous come down. I mean, I personally am not doing some projects that I'd like to do because it's too expensive. I'm going to wait, and hopefully prices will come down. I don't know.
That affects our first-time buyers coming into our community as well, because if you're a builder, you're not going to build a $200,000 house. Not that you can buy a $200,000 house hardly anymore. But
It's amazing. The houses that I think in my mind only 2 or 3 years ago would be at 250 to 275, exactly to your point, which to me sounds affordable for a young couple. Those houses are selling for $575,000 to $600,000 in these subdivisions that I'm talking about.
yeah, ranches have now reached $400,000.
Yeah, absolutely
Which is-
right. And it's out of reach, so maybe that's why we're not seeing the population really grow too quickly. Because also we have a requirement in most zones for large lots. So we might want to rethink that, we have the village residential that is at 40,000 square feet. But that's the only zone where it's small enough so it might be affordable. And I think the intent in 2004 comprehensive plan was to steer the development down towards the village district so that people could walk to the village or get to things and get to transportation easier. But it really didn't work. I don't know why, but we don't have a lot of affordable housing.
Do we have a lot of land available for that sort of housing in that area?
I believe so, yeah. We may want to look at areas at some point to add to that district or look at other places, but yeah, there's a lot of land available. I think part of the problem is the expense of developing. You know, if you're going to develop and do affordable housing, unless it's subsidized, there's no real incentive because they can get $500,000-$600,000 for a single family,
Yes.
you know.
When we're saying affordable, are we saying affordable with a little a or a big A? As in like a state program with affordable like AMI, you know, restrictions, or affordable for like a first-time home buyer that's like coming in?
I'm thinking more first-time buyer.
Yeah, me too.
Just using that as an example. Not saying that every home that would have been $200,000 for first time, but that's where they're going to kind of land is,
Yep.
is within the little A, I guess it would be.
Okay. Just because I think that the way that those projects are financed are a lot different, and I think the state subsidies play a larger part for the capital A programs than the little A programs, obviously, because there isn't a subsidy for the little A.
Hey, Chris, can you educate us? What I thought there was some expiration on planning board approval for a subdivision.
There is. Well, there wasn't. Only recently did we do a sunset clause. Before that, they didn't expire. And if it was a phased development, planned to be a phased development, they could ask for the planning board to phase it. And there was no time period for that. Now, I think, I don't remember the year, 2015 or 16, we looked at a sunset clause and they do expire, somewhat similar to the DEP's permits. So it's like 5 years to 7 years that they have to go back and look at their stormwater calculations and go back to the DEP for another permit for the site plan, and then that would trigger them to come back to the planning board in many cases. So we do have a sunset clause now, but the ones that was speaking about, there was none.
Wow. And that stays with the property, so if the property changes hands.
Yes, it goes with the property.
Okay. Interesting.
Is that, Peter?
Yeah, Kale, as far as the two things, as far as history goes, just to bring up to snuff with the town, in the mid-2000s, the town actually passed a moratorium on building, to give you an idea of just how hot the real estate market was going. But then the bottom fell out, and I believe for 5 years while that moratorium was in place, we didn't meet the threshold once as far as saying, no, you can't build, because it stopped so quickly.
But we got real close.
We got close.
Because it was a formula that had, it used a percentage of the last 10 years. It was like it was going to go to zero.
Sure.
The year that I went to the planning board or the select board and talked about, I think you were on the board, we talked about getting rid of the growth management ordinance, and we did. Because when I started here, you could build up to, I believe, in 2005 when I started, the previous year or two before, we did 70 houses, then 60. Then it went down to like 40, 30. It kept diminishing.
Sure.
So it got to the last year when we got rid of the growth management on us, I could only issue 6 permits. And I saw that as a problem.
Yeah, it was a
so
problem.
we got rid of the growth management ordinance.
And the other, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the federal definition of affordable housing, so I don't know if that's the big A or the small A, is if either your mortgage, your monthly mortgage or rent is 30%
Of your
of your gross household income, that's considered affordable. Anything over 30% is considered not affordable. And I believe that includes utilities.
I think it does. All right, do we have any further discussion on the 2004 comprehensive plan?
I think it's a great model to follow, and we ought to stick pretty close to it, but there'll probably be a new chapter or two. As Peter said, I think there'll be some raw numbers that fill some of these chapters that perhaps the St. Joe's engineering students could help with, or environmental students, whatever. Yeah, we'll certainly need strong planning support to work down through and update what was done before. Some of it hasn't changed, but certainly looking through the priorities list in the back, we've gotten a lot of stuff done since this was published.
And I just make my pitch now for this because I'm a bit of a history buff, and I think this is tremendous. And I know later on we're going to be discussing a boat trip and a road trip, which I would encourage as many people as possible to attend. Being on the zoning board of appeals for as many years as I was, I got to know the town pretty good just going on sidewalks and looking at other properties. I think Ernie Knight's history in part one of the comprehensive plan for 2004 is exemplary. I didn't really see that much in some of the other plans that I reviewed as far as incorporating it. I'd make a pitch for one thing, and it's not to make anyone in this room, the community, or the country feel guilty. But actually, if the preface for this, right now it starts basically with the establishment of the town by Massachusetts and the Beverly militia, and they fought in the wars, and they got a reward, which was, plots of land, and they finally ended up getting Raymond. But I would think if we could go back maybe a little bit further and acknowledge where the first residents of this community were, I think that wouldn't be a bad thing, because I really haven't seen any examples of that in any of the plans I've seen as well. And so just looking at the First Nation, as they call it in Canada, before we were Raymond residents, or there were residents before us. So I just put the pitch in for that.
I second that, Peter.
One item I think I wanted to mention about the 2004 comprehensive plan was there was quite a bit of information on natural resources and some of the studies that have been done about where we stand with all of our water quality. And if we're going to be getting statistics and collecting data from people, I would say we should certainly update our natural resource statistics and figure out, how have we done as far as protecting our natural resources. The portion in there about China Lake was a little scary to read, honestly, and that the quality of the lake went down so much so quickly, and obviously it was decades worth of degradation that led to that. But I would say our lakes and our really hold so much value and for our area. So I would think that we would really want to put an emphasis on making sure that we're doing a good job compared to 2004 and how we are protecting that.
Kayla, I could add a couple things to that. We've had lakes closer than China Lake. We had Highland Lake in Wyndham, and I actually was part of the committee that helped try to save that lake. And that lake was stricken with
Cyanobacteria.
Yes, and they never knew exactly where it came from, but it came from, they thought, from too many malfunctioning septic systems. Alewives got into the lake, and they degraded the oxygen level down low. Then this algae bloom started, and they got green. But it got to the point where they were worried about, if it gets to a certain point, and maybe John can speak to this because I know he's more versed in it, but it can get to a level where dogs or animals that drink out of the lake will die. Mm-hmm. So they went on a very aggressive plan and did a lot of phosphorus control. They did all these different watershed studies, and all the experts from DEP, and there was all these committees working on it, and they came up with a point system to address construction on the lake for smaller properties, and it was mirrored after Raymond's point system. So we have that in place, and I can tell you that our lakes are in basically really good shape, but they have to be watched. And I think you're on to something that we should, it should be a very high priority to protect our lakes. Crescent Lake has a history of having bad oxygen levels in it. I think Panther's a little more healthy. Sebago obviously is a drinking water supply, so that's monitored by Portland Water District. But I would tell you from my experience being here for as long as I have, the lakes are in pretty good shape. But it is something you have to be aggressive about, and code enforcement's important for not cutting the buffers and making sure that when construction's done, there's erosion control. So that's been a high priority here, and the town has done a good job. So I applaud you for bringing that up, and we'll hopefully continue to do that.
Good point, Jim.
I think, and just to take Jackie's points a bit further, when I was reviewing the plan, and this goes along with my question earlier to Sue, I can understand a lot of where we've been, but I've been in Raymond for 7 years. I don't understand a lot of what we've done or where we've come, so I'm sure a lot of this will come naturally over the course of our next few meetings, but I'd like to keep the plan present and a part of the discussion, just because this is a great model, but I want to understand what our current baseline is too, so that we're not building on 2004, we're building on 2022 and going from there. Just to level set where we're at as the information starts to come in, and if we need to renegotiate our priorities as we move forward, once we do have that current baseline, I think that'll be a good place to really move from.
One question I have for Don. Do you know, is there an official definition of the Lakes region?
No,
Yeah,
but
'cause
we like to think we're the center.
well, we are.
Yeah,
Absolutely, we
when
are.
I was in the mid-coast in Rockport, we thought we were the center there too, so. No, I don't think there's I guess generally speaking, you know, Chris may chime in on this, you know, maybe Wyndham to Bridgeton and Harrison, so that's a pretty big area.
Yeah, I would say the whole Sebago Lake watershed.
Yeah.
Say anything that touches Sebago.
Yeah.
and
Or-
then
or
a
is it
little
And
bit
that's
more.
huge, that goes all the way up to Otisfield.
I mean, in our last plan, we basically did the 302 side of Sebago and ignored Standish, and so that's why I was curious, because I never ignored Standish or Sebago or Naples, Naples was included because it's on the 302 side.
Yeah, I
But
would
was
include
quite-
all of the communities that are in the periphery, you know, the watershed communities for sure, but when they talk about the Lakes region towns, so it's usually the towns that are touching the lakes.
Right, of
Yeah,
which there's 7,
Yeah.
but the missing were Standish and Sebago.
Yeah, they're part of it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the in the actual plan, the 2004 plan, it referenced the communities, and it was basically Bridgeton to Wyndham, but nothing on the other side of Sebago.
Interesting.
Yeah, when I say that, I'm saying, you know, from that, I guess, I don't know if it would be longitude, latitude, whatever, from that way up, all the towns on either side of the
Yeah.
lake. So you got, I think Baldwin, and you got all kinds of, you know, Otisfield, and although they're not on the lake, but in the watershed. But when people say the Lakes region, I don't think they think of Otisfield, you know, some of the inboard towns. It's usually, as I said, the towns that are right proximal to the water bodies.
I would say it might be appropriate to say that Raymond is the gateway to the Lakes region.
Maybe.
What you're speaking of is basically, all they did is view anything along 302 was the Lake region, Wyndham to Bridgeton.
Well, the beginning historical piece of it explained that a lot of that was Raymond at one point in time, and that, you know, those towns broke off, you know, Naples and Casco broke off from Raymond, so maybe that's why they reference it, because it formerly was Raymond.
Raymond Town.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Casco and Raymond for certain were Raymond Town, and I don't know the history with Naples, but it's very possible, you know, that we have had
I think we had a piece of Naples for a while.
a piece of Naples, okay. Yeah.
Peter?
It's interesting in the growth management plan, it actually, a component or an element is strategies for collaboration with regional communities. And so that's something that I hopefully we can, certainly from the town's perspective, we can get.
We've been hammering on that
I
for
know.
more than a decade. That,
Yeah.
you know, we made some progress, and we have collaborative relationships with a number of our neighboring communities, and things are changing a lot from, 20 years ago, but there is a difference in how the towns, view municipal services and, the culture of the towns, if you will. And so I'll just say that we go at things more like the suburban Portland communities, and some of the towns as you go west are more like the western Maine communities. But that's changing, because they've had to add full-time staff, professional staff, and but they also like their traditional, systems, which include a lot more elected officials and more of the old Maine approach. And so when it comes to things like, well, one thing, for instance, is the training and standards that we have are similar more to the Portland area, and it's not so much as you get west. And it's a commitment, and we have more resources. We have, more people in our public safety department. We have full-time people. They don't, a lot of them. And so when you try to collaborate with them, it's a little bit of a mismatch. So we tend to go east, not west.
Frank, did you?
I was just going to say, we have a map that we sell at the society, which is an ancestral map, but it basically is everything from Bridgeton, all the towns around Sebago, down through and through Wyndham, and it's presented as a unit.
Because you also have, you're fighting the Angus King thing when they talked about every town having a ladder truck. There is a level of provincialism in small towns, and everybody wants to be a standalone. And the champion standalone of Cumberland County of the state of Maine is the great city of Portland, the walled city. They are an independent entity unto themselves, pretty much. And they can do that on account of their size and, I guess, resources and so forth. And that's changed somewhat too, but you're fighting that kind of thought process as well. We can do it ourselves. But you know what, with the volunteer system that we have now, or what's left of it, and the people or lack thereof who are stepping up to serve, we can't do it ourselves. We need to work with our neighbors. And so even the bigger communities are seeing that now. And there's actually, right now, Cumberland County is doing a study of regionalizing public safety, but it will probably be sub-regionalized because it doesn't make sense, geographically for us to work with some other towns, like Falmouth maybe or something like that, or Baldwin, but it does make sense to work with Casco, Naples, Wyndham, all the way down. And this is done on the West Coast with great success, and they've improved their response times and their survival rates and all these different things by figuring out what they have for resources, prioritizing them, stationing them in such a way that it benefits a region, not a town.
That also cuts out that competition, because if you're trying to recruit people to help you, it's just a bidding war. Basically,
Yeah.
it's who's got the next $5.
Exactly.
And
As soon as,
that doesn't serve the purpose for anybody.
that's part of it as well, is to try to come up with, without any kind of antitrust issues, but come up with some sort of standardization, because we're just fighting this war of pay. And the folks who have these jobs, they work, a couple 24-hour shifts, and then they can, so if they're very ambitious, they can do, 2 full-time salaries, and they can shop towns and figure out which shifts they want to do based on what they get paid. And so we're constantly competing against these other towns and they with us, and so that's caused everything to go up. But the real problem is there's a shortage of people who want to do it across all municipal classifications. It doesn't matter what you look at, public safety, administrative positions. Young people on average don't want to get into public administration, local government, and you do have retirees still, and a lot of people who will get their pension and then come back to work. Casco's new town manager was a police officer in Portland, and so that's what he did. And so they have those people, and then you have military retirees, but you don't see the young people like you used to. You used to have people compete to get these jobs. We just ran a job advertisement for a HR assistant, payrolls, financial job, and we got almost no applicants. And by Maine standards, a good paying job. We run ads for paramedic firefighters, no applicants.
In line with that, Don, I think that as we get further into this, we're going to certainly delve into these issues more, but so many of those issues are interrelated. So if you can't afford to live in a community, you're not going to work in a community. So I think that as we go forward and we're looking at this plan, we're going to be thinking about how these all interact.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, but I can name probably 10 people who live here and work in other towns.
Sure.
Right, Kayla?
Sure.
Because it's a better deal.
Sure.
In some ways.
Sure.
Yeah. So and a lot of it, we have a lot of, and it actually helps us when because they're also working part-time for us. So if we have a major, medical emergency, they're here, but they're not our full-time people. That they're full-time people in other public safety departments.
Sure. Sure.
I guess I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, right, I was just going to say, in along that line of everything seems to be interacting with something else. What we have now that we didn't experience back in 2004 is the demographics in 2004 was very heavily weighted on professions and professionals. And so when we start talking about housing and we start talking about broadband, and the fact that people are more and more going to be looking for places where they can work from home and afford a home and get them in the community, then it's going to be a question of, well, do I have a job? Do I have the capacity to do that job here in Raymond? Because in fact our internet speeds are not sufficient or whatever. So I just I get intrigued more and more. I look at the old plan, I look at where we are, and also the fact that it's hard for me. I have to keep focusing on the fact that it's what we need to sell to the community in questionnaires or guidance or anything else is we're not talking about next week or next year. We're talking about a decade or more that we're trying to vision. And so as I was looking through some of the surveys from the other towns, as an example, there was several answers to the question, do we need more public transportation available? And I had to laugh at a couple of the answers, which is, well, not right now, because I can still drive. But in 5 years, I think we do need it. But the answer to the question was no, we don't need it right now. And I found that interesting. So as far as getting people's impressions and trying to correct some of those impressions, just even in how you select the term, like low-income housing. I had a conversation with our state rep recently, and I was kind of giving my blurb to her, and her comment was, because I said, we need more affordable housing, and she said, well, it's really workforce housing now. And I said, well, okay, so it's a different tier, workforce housing and affordable housing. It depends on what the annual incomes are for the household. That's kind of how we're going to define those things. And then I was reading an article the other day, and it was saying by someone, and it was just, actually some individuals find workforce housing term to be degrading. It's like, there's some people that don't meet that financial definition. They're paying a mortgage and they're working 3 jobs. So, and they're excluded from workforce housing. So, I think that selling the idea of a plan going 10, 15 years down the road and having people accept that vision sometimes is addressing some of the perceptions. Everything from not in my backyard. I think that's a great idea, but just don't do it in my backyard. Are some of the perceptions that I would think the plan has got to address a little bit to try and mitigate some of those stereotypes or false impressions.
Well, I think there's 2 things. We have already talked about surveying the community and how we need to do that and get a lot of input from the community. But on the other hand, I think one of the obligations we have is to educate the community. Because without being able to educate the community, the plan really is not going to be accepted. They have to really know what the ground looks like and why we think the way we think when we develop this plan. So we need to keep that in mind as we go along as well, not only finding out what they think, but also getting back to them, let them know what we know and what they need to know in order to be able to even read our plan.
Absolutely.
Frank, I just come back to, this isn't our plan, it's the community's plan. And we really need to think it that way, because if it's seen as an elitist group of whatever we are here's plan, it's not going to get accepted. And I think, you know, we're kind of the navigators, we're the collectors of information and put it together. But it really needs to, we really need to get in touch with the stakeholders.
I have no problem with
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and that is not what I meant and
No,
what
I know
said.
it isn't. It just,
It is their plan, but we
Yeah.
also have to let them know why we came up with the plan we come up with. I mean, we will take all their input, we'll
Yeah.
use their input, but we also have to go back to them and educate them as to why we made the decisions we made as we develop their plan.
I'm just wondering about taking on a mentality. It's not us and them. It's the community, and I think to the extent we can all kind of get in that space, this is the community's plan. I just think it's going to be. You know, I saw how we, you know, got shot down on a lot of things of the last plan because it was seen part of the quote unquote planning committee, and so again, I just say I think that if we adopt this mentality of this is the community's plan and refer to it as community's plan as opposed to our plan, or we need to do this and they need to do that type of situation, I think it's part of the, you know, it's going to be the group think process that this is the community's plan.
Peter, I just want to go to Jackie.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, on the line of affordable housing and you know, having people kind of have a framework in their mind of what that means and what that looks like. You know, the former plan mentioned mobile home parks as an option, but you know, that's not the only way that affordable housing can be attained. So what does that look like? Is it duplexes? Is it you know, tiny homes? You know, there are many more options that might be more appealing to the community that I think we should kind of educate and present them that these are, you know, affordable housing doesn't have to look like this, it can look like this. And you know, laws were passed this year for single family homes to be able to be converted into multi-family residences up to 4 units per home. You know, does it look like adding an accessory apartment onto your existing home? And is that an opportunity for residents to now earn some income on their own properties or to become a multi-generational home or something like that? So, you know, I think kind of thinking outside the box, thinking of all and presenting kind of all these different options to residents with what it could look like to have affordable housing. It's not just a mobile home park, you know, in town.
Great point.
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, and just as far as the discussion about this is the community's plan, and we're facilitators, and I think it can't be lost on the fact that, and I'm sure there's more than a few people here that have some experience in marketing, we have to market this, that this is the community. We have to publicize. We have to hold numerous meetings and surveys and additional ways to get engage the community and make it very clear this is not an elitist group. This is not someone telling them what to do. Believe me, being on the zoning board of appeals, you don't want to be telling people what to do with their property.
Public hearings, and I would think that it would be appropriate to, and I don't know as we did this so much in Raymond, but in the previous community, we moved around the community and had neighborhood listening sessions, invited people in, you know, provided refreshments, you know, and maybe had a directed, you know, set of questions or whatever, and then, you know, go through those and then just learn what people had on their own minds. And so by villages, in my previous town, there are 5 villages, and I think we might have gone down on the Cape, down to the
I think
Hawthorne
we
House.
did do that.
I think we did that, but moving around the community a little bit and seeing what people think. Just listening.
Yeah, I've thought about that, Don, and we definitely need to sort of assign some neighborhoods, if you will, Raymond Cape being one. But I think it's not just like I can't recall where we did it. I think it was at the Hawthorne House. But I think we need to engage some what do they call those, some political campaigns or when they were introducing the Obamacare, what were the people who met, with groups of people and trained them? I forget what the name was, but we need to engage some people in the neighborhood rather
Community organizers?
yeah, organizers, yeah. And engage some people in each neighborhood that know people in the neighborhood who can get on the phone and say, hey, Frank, can you come to this meeting we're having? And hey, Kayla, having this meeting, as opposed to just putting it in the newspaper or something.
And
Right.
we do have a lot of community associations. We have road associations, we have lake associations. While we were talking about lakes earlier, there are many of these lake associations that do water quality testing, monitoring the oxygen levels and psyche disking and do all these things. And each lake has that. And then you've got road associations, you've got, like you said, you've got the Cape, we've got North Raymond, which I call downtown North Raymond. It's a joke because that's what Jack Cooper used to say when he was the code officer here. But that's another whole community.
That's a great suggestion. They all have annual meetings, and so if you wanted to get on the agenda, we'd have to, I guess we'd have to reach out and find out when those are. I think typically they're in the spring or fall, because that's when a lot of the people are coming into certain neighborhoods. But I've been to a few of them over the years and talked about town happenings and initiatives and so forth. But maybe to have the committee go out to those annual meetings and talk about the comprehensive plan.
It's pretty easy to find. They usually have a president of the association, and I've spoke at some of them for when we changed shoreline zoning, because everybody's concerned they were going to lose property rights, and we went and explained it, and they were very receptive. I remember going to Panther Pond, at their association meeting we held at one of the camps. I don't know if it's Tamanis or Kingsley, but the room probably had 80 people in it. So if we can get those people out, which they'll want to come out, we just need to, like you said, contact them and tell them what we're up to.
And there are common things that people are interested in. For instance, the most recent very egregious land use violations have kind of, it's a bad thing, but in a good way, it's identified that the value that we put on that, and people have really let us know about it.
And they've been very supportive of
Very supportive of the town.
What we're, the enforcement we're doing,
Yeah.
because they're concerned about the quality of the lake and also their property values if this was allowed to continue.
Right. I think we got a letter of support with what, 268, 60 or 80 signatures. So that's not nothing in support of the town. Keep on going.
I would think in the interest of time, we should move on to the next item agenda, unless anyone else has something further to say.
That's a great idea.
All right, so that would be discussing our 3 top items after reviewing the comprehensive plan, what our priorities would be. And we can start anywhere. Do you want to start, Jackie?
Sure. Okay, so my top 3 include natural resource protection, including kind of our drinking water, and I would really love to see where we are as far as public water supply. It mentioned that there were some public water supply areas in town, and wondering if that's anything that can be expanded upon or not. My second one is housing, affordable housing, kind of what I had mentioned just earlier as far as what those options might look like, or the, with in-laws or duplex options. And the third is kind of, okay, I had 4, but I'm gonna stick with 3, is transportation, and more specifically related to this idea of a greenbelt system or making the roadways more pedestrian and bike friendly, especially related to the downtown area. I'm really happy to see the sidewalks that went in on Main Street. I would love to see it loop around up Mill Street and come back on the bottom part of 85 there to create a loop. And especially with our schools up here, I would love to see some sort of an effort to make this stretch of 85 a safer stretch of road. I mean, we've lost power several times from car accidents that have taken out telephone poles along the road. And, you know, I think one of the silver linings to COVID was when everybody was in quarantine, all of a sudden I saw people out walking along the street, and it was great to see. And I would love to, we have some great trails through town, and I would love to see those kind of expanded and developed a little further to make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly.
I can go next. Happy to. I think a lot of my priorities stem from, or some of them stem from, seeing reports that the two fastest growing towns in Maine are Auburn and Wyndham, and sitting smack dab in the middle, I think we're planning for a change that's going to happen within the next 2 years as people continue to not be able to afford Wyndham. They're going to come out if there's housing available. And so a lot of one of my priorities is just a general idea of zoning, land use development. How do we build on the community that we have, increase the people, and still keep ourselves a rural development with the character that we love about our town? I think that's a challenge. I think it's something that we get to educate ourselves on, because I think it's different. Like Jackie said, the new legislation, LD 2003, the way that it's going to impact us and our zoning, and Chris can speak more to it, I'm sure, at some point, how we look at what we establish as the backbone for those particular pieces of our plan, and then and use those changes in a way that benefits our community. In addition to that, I see our businesses in the town changing as well. And so how do we, again, prioritize what's important to us as a community to ensure that we remain a smaller community that's a bit more personable than than Wyndham next door. And then the last one would be outdoor recreation and land preservation. You know, if you look at the 2004 plan and the things that they listed in the outdoor recreation section, it was very similar to where we're at now, which is great. Joe does a great job. I really appreciate working with him. I'd love to see a loop, just like Jackie said. I'd love to see some more accessibility to downtown, to the village area. When we were talking earlier about getting to transportation, I was like, there's no way I'd walk down 85 to get, and I'm within walking distance of that, but I wouldn't do it. It's too, and so just being able to use some of our resources to make different parts of Raymond more accessible, and also ensuring that we maintain some of those larger habitats that keep us a rural space.
I have 5, but I guess I better pare that down now. So I'll just, my number 1 would be natural resource, which includes land conservation and water quality, as well communicated by Jackie and Danielle. So that's 1. I'm going to say affordable housing is my number 2, only because I've been hearing so much about the absence of affordable housing in Cumberland County. and we talk about where's the workforce, where's the, the need to have housing for a range of folks, and a fair amount of the current workforce cannot find that, or students even, freshly graduated students. So affordable housing is my number 2. And my number 3 is something this plan was pretty much silent on, but there is state funding for, and I brought some info about that, but won't clutter up the conversation with it, but it's just climate preparedness. I think it's a new chapter in the book. And I'm hearing the transportation piece I'd like to add that as number 4, but you guys covered that both, having walkable. So that's important. So natural resources, affordable housing, climate preparedness. 1, 2, 3. Go, Brad.
All right. Well, like John, I have more than 3, but I put them in order here. Number 1, I probably know what that's going to be, and that is identifying and reaching out to and listening to the various stakeholders. Residents, community, people who work here who might not be residents, entities that operate here, and communities that have a stake in the future of Raymond, or have a stake in Raymond, I should say, in general. So that's number 1. Number 2, inventory among people and among our group here, what it is that makes Raymond special, and what is it that brought you here, and what is it that's kept you here over the years and likely to keep you. And number 3, identifying essential services for the people who are here. That would include healthcare, medical. I'd like to explore relationships with the Bridgeton Hospital, for example, which is our nearest real healthcare facility here, and see how we might work together. Recreation, both phys ed type things, but also we have a high senior population here, and ideas that can build community among just people in general. As part of this identifying essential services. Transportation is one. Out of the last plan came the Lakes Region bus. I think John and I have been 2 of the most frequent riders on that. I was the very first rider when the bus came to town. And I think we should revisit that. What services can be offered by, I'm calling it City Hall, just because I don't want to focus on the 2 of you here, but just in the generic sense, what services should City Hall be providing to the community? Schools, which I think Frank can be a tremendous help to us on, and Main Street merchants. So all of those, identifying essential services that we should have for residents and that residents want. So 1, stakeholders. Number 2, inventorying what makes the community special. And 3, what kind of services for the people who live and work here.
When I was looking over the 2004 plan, there wasn't much that I felt we had to. Did I cut you off?
No.
Okay, sorry. There wasn't much that I thought that I had to reinvent the wheel there. A couple of them were already mentioned, but during our last, when we came to vote last, one of the things that I want is to kind of keep cannabis storefronts out of Raymond. That was something that was voted on by the town, and there was a big no, but that's not in the 2004 plan. I think that's something you're going to see obviously more of now, because of that wasn't something that was brought up back then as being legal, but I still want to keep those cannabis storefronts out of Raymond. I think that Wyndham's got plenty of them. They can go almost anywhere, and I don't really think that Raymond needs them. The other 2 kind of already touched upon, but I was asking my wife, I said, what's important to you? And she almost had the opposite of what I wanted, which of course is affordable housing. And she said, well, her mind was a little bit different what I was thinking. So we kind of compromised. So affordable housing without the loss of rural character. And a couple of those ways were touched upon already, which I think is awesome. And I really like what's going on Main Street. I live on Main Street. The sidewalk doesn't come to me. I would like to see more sidewalks I think Main Street becomes a bit of a racetrack, and I'm hoping that the sidewalk kind of slows things down. Just walking my dogs on that street can be quite dangerous. And I think the first part of Main Street where we have the sidewalks, I've actually seen a reduction of speed there, which is nice, but once they get kind of towards my house, then they're speeding by. So I would like to see more sidewalks, and they're being utilized right now, even though they're not quite, I mean, they're finished, but they're not quite finished. You know, they're being utilized right now, which is great. So to me, that tells me that that's something that is definitely working.
Number one for me would be preserve, protect the natural environment of the town. And I think that encompasses maintaining the rural nature of the town, but finding a way to do that so that we can still develop. Number two would be to encourage more diverse housing options. And number three would be town services.
I think my three echo generally what the rest of the group has already said, but one I have is natural resources. I think that, you know, what the 2004 plan had was a good base for us to, you know, start with, but I think there's obviously some more information, PFAS being, you know, a big one, you know, and I think everyone's generally concerned with the water quality and just keeping, you know, our lakes and streams beautiful and, you know, full of recreational potential. I think that's a big driver in the community. You know, I do echo the alternative kind of housing uses. I think that's really important, but I'd like to expand that to general land use policy. You know, we talked about the 2004 plan trying to drive more commercial and residential to kind of the town center, and that it didn't work so well, but there's no reason that it can't. You know, I think when I look at Raymond being relatively new here, and I look at a place like Camden with a lot of natural beauty and a downtown with storefronts on both sides, and you know, you drive your car 20 miles an hour through it and you enjoy the scenery, and those sidewalks are getting a lot of use. I mean, that's something we could have here. You know, I think with the right policies and, you know, with the community behind it, if that's what they want, you know, I think that's something we could help facilitate. You know, and there's no reason why we can't, you know, put some smaller apartments above, so maybe there's more options for people. And then also we have some great public places that we could also activate more if there are more people downtown as well. So I think that kind of coincides a lot of, you know, the walking trails, the sidewalks. It kind of creates a more cohesive community. So that's where my number two is kind of general land use. And then three kind of echoes that, being kind of transportation and infrastructure. You know, I think this also goes to, I'm including internet in here. I think, you know, internet in certain areas of cell service. I don't live on Egypt Road, but I drive through Egypt Road. You know, I think having access to internet is almost like a public utility these days. It's necessary. And if, you know, Raymond is going to change with the times, and, you know, if we do want to make it an acceptable place for people to be able to work from home and still enjoy the natural beauty, you know, internet's going to be essential. So I think they're cohesive. And those are my three.
Well, I agree with just about everything everyone else has said. I will give you my three. Housing. I think housing is extremely important. We really need to look at that and come up with a plan that will allow it to expand and allow the population to rise in a positive, creative way. Transportation, I think, is more important than ever. I agree with everything Brad said about public transportation and the bus system. We've got to find a way to get people out of their cars. There's no doubt about that. And public facilities and services. I think those are very important and need to be expanded to serve the entire community. And to jump in on what John said about the climate piece, I think we have to have a really good discussion about what locals can do to help. I think most people in power today are waiting for Steve Jobs to be reincarnated so that he can get up on stage and tell us how we're going to solve the problem, and we'll all go out and buy 1 billion of them. That's not going to happen. What needs to happen is 1 million different things that are local. If we could get things happening local, we could make great changes. But we have to have that discussion about it.
All right, mine again mirror a lot of what's already been discussed. My top, I think, thing is affordable housing, but also on the same coin of that, controlled growth. So making sure that that growth is happening where it most makes sense, and that includes where people would have more access to services. My second priority is protecting the natural resources, the lakes, the ponds, and the forested land all alike. I think that's certainly probably what we almost all enjoy the most about living here. And my third one is recreation and community development in general. And that encompasses a lot of things: trails, parks, community programming for all ages, just recreation in general. And I love the idea of extending the sidewalks and also making 85 a little bit more safer. I live on 85 and there's no place to safely walk. I would love to extend that. I know that is not our road, and I know that we have tried several times to petition the state to help us out on that. So I know that might be a little bit of a far reach, but I do believe we can do a lot more in the village area. And I love the idea, and I was thinking the same thing, Jackie, of extending that sidewalk all the way to Mill Street and right back around. And that would be a great addition to our community.
Madam Chair, we do have we do have an email from Greg Foster. He couldn't attend tonight,
Yes.
but he did give his 3
Oh,
as well.
great.
And so his first is the shoreland zone size. All of Raymond Cape is in shoreland zone. The remaining ponds and lakes are 600-foot shoreland zone. Streams are 100-foot shoreland zone. I'm assuming that's the width. Is that what he's referring to?
It's the buffer from the edge of the stream on each side.
Thank you. I didn't want to assume too much. State minimums are 75 feet for streams and 250 feet for lakes, ponds, and some wetlands and streams. For things other than timber harvesting, Raymond requires a permit to cut trees in this zone. I believe there are many trees cut without a permit. There's more I would like to discuss. I brought this up for the planning board to discuss and was told it would be best to bring it up to the CompPlan, so here it is. Okay, so number 2 is multifamily housing. Raymond limits where multifamily homes can be built. How is Raymond's ordinance affected by the recently passed state law allowing more units on one lot? Has Raymond's limits to where multifamilies can be built contributed to using up the land faster for housing? Number 3, current use property taxes. A huge and complex issue. I would like to see the current use taxes placed on larger properties with the hoops of forest management plans, recertifications, penalties, which discourages people from enrolling in current use taxes like tree growth, and proving income from agriculture. I believe a restructured property tax of this nature would increase the ability of landowners to afford to keep their land and resist selling to developers. I am quite sure property taxation is tied to the Maine Constitution and limits the ability of a town to restructure taxation. We certainly can control the mill rate, maybe an adjusted mill rate for current use properties. I expect the budget committee would have something to say about this one.
So I can add just to his point that the land use is regulated by the state of Maine, and the assessor is obligated to follow by the penalties. That's set forth for the state, determined by them. It's not something that each town individualizes. Peter?
But leave it to good old Greg. What I was going to say is after this discussion was it's surprising that the T word didn't come up, because I think what has to be realized is that if a lot of this is to happen, there is going to be some impact on taxes. And I would expect that while it didn't come up as maybe the top three, my guess is when we get out into the community, it probably is going to be in the top three when you start talking about some of the initiatives we might endorse. That being said, we're one of the best endowed communities in the state, and so I think that's going to be just to prepare us for the fact that there is going to be that we're going to hear that T word a lot.
I think Dawn alluded to this last time, that we are coming up on an evaluation which does tend to plummet the overall tax rate. And then,
Go ahead.
sorry, and then we also, hopefully to protect some of our seniors living in the community, there's the new law that essentially sort of freezes their taxes. So that will help.
And I understand that, and I'm sure a lot of us, especially over 65, have been following that very closely. But my understanding is two things with that law. Number one is that it does, if there's a shortfall, it's going to shift the taxes onto the people that are younger. So there's probably going to be some impact there. Number two, my experience with the state of Maine is that when money's not there, you don't get it. I mean, it's that simple. If it's not there, you don't get. Doesn't matter what the statute is. If the money's not there, you don't get it.
That program, in my mind, although it has a laudable end and goal, but in that it's not means tested.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
the problem.
it's not sustainable.
That's the
and
problem.
and I think it's going to have to be reevaluated. And some insight I got into it is that in an election year, it was a difficult thing to veto, and so I think it's going to have to be addressed. Some of the very first people in to apply for, that program were people who are
Sure.
well able to afford the taxes and have substantial properties and so forth.
Without the means testing, the explanation I got, the best I could dig down into it, is that it would be too cumbersome for the town to determine what the incomes were and whether that smacks of not being very valid, and it just occurs to me that this is an example of equality, which we all run up against, but it's not equity.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yes.
I have no problem with helping seniors, but I have a problem with this. If I have a $300,000 loan and I put in the paperwork and I'm going to save a little money, if I've got a $20 million place in Raymond and I put in the paperwork, I'm saving thousands.
So as far as sustainability of that program, I laud the effort, and I believe in the last comprehensive plan it was even discussed as far as how is it that we can kind of shift some of the tax burden off of the elderly in order to allow them to stay in their homes. And it makes, I'm sure to this group, it makes sense. I mean, if you just look at where the state is, where am I going to go? I mean, where am I going to go? There's no place for me to go. I got to stay in my home. So, I mean, if every community had, a 32 housing development off of 85, then, maybe I could stay in the community. But outside of that, where am I going to go? So I allowed that. That's a good effort. I think without the means testing, I don't see, as Dawn says, the word is sustainability. I don't see any longevity to this program.
Peter, you'll love Penny Ben.
All right, so just really quick, I sort of took a few keywords from what everybody said, and
Do Chris and I get to participate?
well, I guess I don't see why not.
Most everything's been said, but, I did have on the environmental protection and natural resources, I mean, obviously that's one of the core values of the town, and, you know, I look at my hometown, which is considered to be one of the best towns to live in, most powerful communities in the state of Maine, that's Scarborough. To my way of thinking, growing up there on a dairy farm, a rural town, much of what made the town special is gone and gone forever. So it's a balancing act, you know, between the environmental protection, and which is of utmost importance, and then these things that we want to do, and I think that we can do a lot more with respect to quality of life and quality of place, and to distinguish ourselves, because in talking to my younger employees, many of them look at Raymond, and it's changed somewhat now with the rec department and the library. These are some pretty big initiatives for the town recently, but we on average don't offer as much as some of our competing communities. So, you know, you want to attract new people who are diverse in the demographics, but you don't want to, you know, open the floodgates to development and see what's happened to a lot of the once rural communities in southern Maine. So to sort of balance those two things, and of course the way you do that is to have good ordinances and, you know, policies and the way that you administer the town. So, but of course you have to have a shared vision. Everybody has to agree on what's important, because probably there are people who look at the Scarborough of today, certainly people who come from Boston, think it's a pretty rural town. And so, you know, I just think be careful, you know, of setting this course. But I think the thing is, the environment is what makes the place special. And in the past, we used to be known for like three things: environmental quality, great schools, and great trash pickup. So that's it. And now I'm saying that we still have the environment. I think we could do better on the schools. We still have great trash pickup. So anyway, but we can build from there. And so strong land use ordinances that promote the goals and objectives that you all set. Sustainability was not part of this. I think that's been touched on. I think that's super important. And then the broadband issue. And I would just close by saying, when I came here 21 years ago, you know, I recognized right away the town had the wherewithal to do and be anything it wants to be. And Peter touched on that. This community is one of, you know, half dozen now, but originally a couple of towns with a AAA bond rating. That's because the finances of the town are so strong. Post reval, I think this town's going to probably double, close to double in value on a you know, population to valuation basis, and it's on account of our, you know, lakes and ponds. We are as strong as any coastal community financially. So, but another core value of Raymond, though, has been low taxes and basic cable services. We want to provide basic government. So, as I say, that's changed somewhat, but there is going to be a huge hue and cry if you go out and, you know, propose all these things and raise the tax rate. So you have to do the two things, you know, in concert, and you know, and have a real plan, and incrementally, with paying close attention to that tax rate. And I look to my previous community. I think, you know, I was part of it, and they've continued it. They've done a lot, and that's Rockport, where they have low taxes, a valuation similar to ours, a smaller population, but they're constantly investing in the community and improving it, and not losing the rural character. And so that's what I'd like to see us do. Yeah.
Before you leave that topic, you and I had a wonderful conversation here a couple of weeks ago. And my takeaway from that was that this is a community of wonderful resources, and I think everybody here recognizes that. And yet there are a lot of people in this community who don't have access to them for financial reasons. And you had talked about the need for more public ownership of some of these assets as they come on the market. And you used an example, maybe you could just run through that again, of, I think Loon Echo had contacted you. Hey, we have the rights.
Conservation easement.
Conservation easement. Would you, the town of Raymond, be willing to take ownership of this parcel of land? And you said, we can't.
Well, the Board of Selectmen elected, you're talking about the Raymond Community Forest?
I think that was the one.
Yeah, they elected not to do that, but it could be revisited at some future date, you know, and I think the concern was the carrying cost of that for the town, but I don't think it's particularly great. And then you have the ability, and Greg Foster, I'm sure, would love to help us. He helps us manage our community forests that we have already, and so you have the ability to you know, timber harvest it, you know, as it is appropriate. But that's a resource we can revisit, and, you know, there are other significant and special areas that still exist that and we talked about this last time around, trying to figure out what they were. John was big on this, figure out what's important and try to protect it, right? And so I think, thankfully, a lot of that still is in a natural state. So that's another topic again this time around. So we want it all. We want to have a vibrant community that attracts people of all ages and you know, backgrounds, and we want it to stay the same.
Want it to be free.
And we want it to be just as a rural place. And we want to have great services, but we don't want to pay any taxes. So, you know, we want all that. Right?
We'll get there easy.
My turn? Oh, okay.
Shoot, so.
Well, I listened to all of your priorities, the 3 priorities. I agreed with all of them. The reason I came to Raymond, I grew up in Gray. I've moved to Raymond, and it's for the natural resources, basically. The lakes and the forests. And, you know, growing up in Gray, I've seen Raymond from early 60s to today, and it really hasn't changed that much.
No.
It really hasn't. You can still go up North Raymond Road, and there's still the same places. We've had growth in certain areas. So what I would like to throw out, and I obviously am not going to be voting, but I have some things that I've been thinking of that would make Raymond a better place, and infrastructure is one of those things that would help us. If we want to grow our commercial district, add jobs so that we can have the affordable housing and people have a place to work, they need jobs if they're going to stay in Raymond. So I think a sewer system on 302 or down in the Village District would be instrumental in doing that. So we could do businesses with maybe a second story that have apartments above them, and maybe expand the width of the commercial district so we can stretch out a little bit, and a bypass, something to get off 302, get over to 85, maybe from Wyndham through the Grondin Pit and up through, so that you could have a new area where you could get people off 302, have the shops, have the affordable housing, you have hotels, whatever you want to do. There's thousands of acres between Wyndham and Raymond that is undeveloped, and only 3 or 4 people own those properties. And if we could get those properties, I think you could get people off 302, we could expand, have jobs created, and the housing, and I just think it's something that we should look at. I don't know that it'll ever come to fruition. I know Wyndham's interested in it. We were working on it when I was in Wyndham, and Dawn and I have been working on it for what, 10 years? We've been talking about it.
Yeah.
And you know, I think if we got together with Wyndham, we could possibly pull that off.
Yeah.
And it would benefit the town tremendously, particularly if we had sewer on that section.
Right.
Because the sewer allows you to do more commercial uses with not a huge effect, because you can do smaller. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to build a downtown Freeport, but I'm thinking in my mind something like over in Conway, where they did the bypass to get off from that main route that goes up through Conway, and it allows people to get out and walk and recreate and do all kinds of things. It would be, we don't have a section of the shorefront that's long enough to develop like a, you know, like a Camden or a Rockport. So, but we do have the forests and the views, and once you get up onto the top of Patricia Avenue, which the town owns, you can see the White Mountains. I mean, can you imagine having a hotel up there and a convention center and some affordable housing and shops? I just see that as a great idea, but I don't know if it'll ever come together, but it's something that we should talk about.
One other that's really, I'm 100% with Chris on that. One other thing we didn't mention, I don't think we mentioned, is the, I guess in a few years we'll have the school, and that's going to be a tremendous community resource. You know, at one time, the sidewalk that you now see in Main Street, my administrative assistant at the time, Danielle, wanted to apply for a grant to build a sidewalk to the school, and the state saw it as a kind of a sidewalk to nowhere, because we didn't have a downtown. It was a downtown, kind of initiative, and that morphed into the Main Street idea. And of course, it did take 6 or 7 years, all deliberate municipal speed, to get things done. but we finally did get it done. We can expand it, it's just a matter of, planning and the financial piece primarily, because it's expensive. But, and we can extend the water line. I'm 100% with Chris on the bypass. It is a Wyndham priority, it's not their highest priority, they got a couple others ahead of it, but.
Well, they've done some connectors that would lead into this.
Right, lead into it, but we've got over 100 acres up there ourselves, and there's lots of, opportunity, but the big one for me is the school. I think, you got a place for the town office, you got a place for the library, the rec department, you've got the gymnasium, which was originally, I think, built as a community gym, right, Frank? And so that was a town thing, and so we're gonna get all that back, and I think we should plan. It's not gonna be cheap. I mean, you look at the town of Gorham and what they did with their old elementary school, it's really a showplace. I don't know as we go that far, but hopefully we'll do it right and plan for it and have the resources to convert that into a community center, and then maybe build that sidewalk. Yeah.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is survey. We had discussed at the last meeting trying to put something together for the November election. And the idea would be, it would be sort of short and easy, but also looking at the surveys from other towns. They are not short and easy. They're not something that someone on their way out from voting who only wants to take a few minutes would be filling out. I think there's a benefit to sort of, and I think, Brad, you had touched on this, many surveys. So I don't see why we can't have something sort of short and sweet for the November election, and then work on a more comprehensive, wholesome survey that we really would try to get as many community members as we can to fill out. It's just my initial thoughts on the survey.
That's a great idea. Maybe maybe the survey this year is just what we just did.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I thought that when we discussed last meeting, the idea of us bringing these three to try and find out, what's the commonality amongst this committee for, let's say, the top three, that would formulate the basis for the questionnaire at the November elections, only to, as it's been suggested, to let the community, if you will, it's the initial salvo of us PR and saying, there's more to come, folks.
Yeah.
But right now, we just need some guidance so that we can get off the dime before we have our consultant here to develop the questions, and we've got some great examples of questions there.
So I think what we should do is try to distill down what we got out of this and maybe other ideas that may occur to us to some reasonable number, and let people, so it's easy, it's got to be easy, so they do it quickly. They
And
can
let
check
the
off.
community confirm what we just discussed.
And then there should be a line for something else.
Sure.
That we haven't got there,
Yeah.
but I think if you had 10 or 12 things or whatever it turns out to be, it can't be too long, but something they can do on exit very quickly.
Absolutely, I'm thinking a minute a question. 3
Something-
minutes and they're gone. Tell them it's only going to be 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Peter, something that you had mentioned earlier when you were reviewing those surveys, same thing that I noticed, that a couple of them did say, what are your priorities 10 years from now? And I think that's also something, if we can somehow sneak that in there, like what are your priorities
Absolutely.
now and
Sure.
for the future, or in the next 10 years, what are your priorities? I think that sort of gives that encompassing question.
Absolutely. Get that thought out early, don't be thinking about next week or even next year.
Yeah.
I think as a part of that survey too, we could even have at the bottom, hey, be on the lookout for our next survey.
Sure. Yeah.
Like just preparing people, this is an ongoing process and we're gonna want your involvement all the way through.
Yeah.
Because if you've got their eyes then, you wanna get them mentally ready for the next step.
Absolutely.
And that's gonna be a great opportunity
That's a
to do
great
that.
point, and you can use the Roadrunner. Why don't we just plan on, I guess I'll have to tell Melissa the bad news, because we always have more content than we have space, but we could have a place on an ongoing basis, maybe in the Roadrunner, which is what we have as a newsletter these days, and it goes to every postal customer. It's not the old Roadrunner, which you probably, 7 years, you don't know that one, but we actually produced a newspaper, that was, in some people's
Very
eyes,
informative.
very informative.
Comprehensive.
John Benush called it, my part at least, excruciating details. So we don't have that anymore, but we have the 2-page thing, and we should plan on being in that,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I would think to a number of the citizens in this community, when they start hearing about the comprehensive plan, and then you gave me 3 questions, there seems to be a disconnect here between comprehensive and 3 questions. But if in fact what they know is that there is going to be a comprehensive questionnaire.
So maybe that's the first one, is a little blurb on it's coming, and here's what we're doing.
Preliminary survey is what we call
There
it.
you go.
This is
PR,
our-
PR, PR,
Yeah.
change perception.
Madam Chair.
I'm a big data guy, and I think to the extent that we can get people's names and contact information as optional, it can help us. We want to do neighborhood meetings, and we got mini surveys at the election day from the 5 of you, and you 2 live in one neighborhood too. We've got people to follow up with, and hey, look, Don, we're doing a neighborhood meeting in your neighborhood. Can you help us get some people there? And Kayla, you checked off. You love the waterways of Raymond. We're going to be talking about that. Can you bring some friends to give us some ideas? So to the extent we can get contact information for people. The other thing too, and you may have some ideas on this, Frank, what we did last time very successfully was we got the schools here in Raymond involved, got the kids involved. And we actually had, I don't know if you remember, we had an art contest of, what you like about Raymond. And we got some wonderful paintings from some of the students in Jordan Small and the middle school. We actually used one of those as kind of the logo for the group. We also came up with a name, and I'm trying to think of, was that Raymond Tomorrow, our group, or was that the one before us? But I think we ought to think about a name for the comprehensive plan rather than just calling it the comprehensive plan and linking it together. But to the extent students can get involved in this, that's the future of our community, and trying to get them engaged in what do you like, and then they take it home to their parents. And
Maybe it's a little more difficult now with the RSU, but because, and they see it as sending things home, doing things with us, as diluting their mission. But interestingly, they like to use our media channels to get their message out, but that's a social commentary, I guess. But maybe we should see, it's a crazy idea probably, but maybe ask the questions of the young people, what they value in their community, the kids who are in school, and maybe get some buy-in that way. I hope the school would consider that.
Madam Chair, I recorded all of everyone's 3 things. I could make a list of what each of those are. And, you already did that?
I did it and X'd everybody off.
Oh,
But that's okay.
Okay.
No, I would love to see what you did.
Yeah, and then we could compare and make sure we weren't missing something. But what I was thinking is, especially at the election, people are willing to stop and sign their name and do something quickly.
Yeah.
And if we had like some signs up that said, this is a preliminary survey, there's more to come, we're working on the comprehensive plan, something, not a lot of words, because if you put too many words in front of people, they stop reading. But if we had maybe this list and circle the ones that are important to you, and is there anything else? Something really simple as a first go. Because, and I'm thinking of the election, but people tend to want to get in and out. And if we make it too long, they won't fill it
I
out.
think it's going to need a 3-line intro piece of wording to just explain that we're now up and running. And this is a preliminary data gathering, info gathering effort, the first of many to come, to help us frame our direction.
Well, and the way this is going to be successful at the election is to have it manned,
Yeah.
as Frank can attest to.
And you got to be somebody who's engaging
And brief.
and brief
And responsive to the urgency which most folks come in and out of the voting booths with.
Yeah.
But the folks that will see and stop, they're going to be sincere about wanting to take time to fill it out, and that's who we're interested in hearing from.
Yeah.
There'll be
Right at the
two
get-go.
people, one who, you know, there'll be some who want to talk forever about it
Right.
and all their ideas under the sun, and then there'll be those who are like,
I think you have to catch people's attention too. I
Yes.
mean, it has to be something like, you know, help plan Raymond's future or something that jumps out at them as they're walking out. And then somebody, a friendly person who's there with, please, 3 minutes or 1 minute, whatever.
Oh, John's volunteering.
I will volunteer if I'm around.
I'm sorry.
What I was going to say is, you know, I went to a conference and they had, you know, essentially a survey, but it was kind of on a poster board, and you just kind of put some stickers up.
Stickers on the
Yeah.
board.
Didn't even have to
Yeah.
fill anything out.
Yeah.
So I know we don't get the, you know, the email addresses and some of that, the other data that would be useful for future outreach, but if, you know, brevity is the main thing we're going for and catching
That's a
people's
really
attention,
interesting
some
concept.
Great idea.
it's a very good.
bright stickers with just, you know, future of Raymond or Raymond's future, you know, a catchy title, and, you know, maybe we just have 5 categories and you get 2 stickers or something.
Put your money on your favorite.
That would be a really simple and quick way to do it.
Oh,
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
everybody loves stickers, right?
Yeah, we'd want to get stickers because the blowers in there will blow any Post-it off. I can't even keep my posters on the walls all day long, so.
Good idea.
Well, I'm willing to try and put something together for everybody to review prior to our next meeting, and then we can sort of discuss and fine tune that. So that would be in October, right? So then we would have plenty of time to make this happen by November.
Could I make one further suggestion?
Absolutely.
Because the election could be a little bit more watered down, like John is suggesting. But Kevin has a software now on our website that we can make surveys and gather data and gather email addresses and whatever. That's what we've done for the
We also put a
recycling.
poster at the town office.
Yes. Yeah, and we could have a written one there, and they have time while we're typing in their marriage license or whatever to be able to have them. They have a little more time generally in the town office to be able to fill things out. So it could be a little larger there and in the Roadrunner than it
A
would be at
larger
election.
preliminary survey.
Yes.
Yeah.
It-
Around the same time frame would be a good idea.
Mhm.
Well, maybe we could even have a sheet of paper that has a link to the survey on it. So if they're willing to put a sticker on a board, we hand them a sheet of paper
Right.
and say, here's a larger survey if you'd like to.
I was
Yep.
even thinking a bookmark because it's it's 2% less likely to get thrown out, but I mean, it's smaller and it's easier. But I agree, I was thinking to hand them something at the same time, because if we can direct them to another place, that's our opportunity to do it.
All right, any further discussion on that right now? I think we've got a good plan moving forward. So the next item on the agenda is setting dates for a Raymond bus tour.
Sue's been working on these.
And what I have for the bus piece is that Monday through Friday, it could be really any time with at least a week's notice. Saturday afternoons are possible starting September 24th until snow flies, or preferably earlier than that. For the boat, the dates that Bruce has so far is next Tuesday or next Thursday between 10 and 3. He doesn't have a Saturday date as yet.
Is that 10 to 3 on both days?
Yes. And part of the reason for having it earlier like that is wind. You don't want to get out on Sebago when the wind gets up.
And as time goes on, it's going to get colder
Colder and rougher up there.
and rougher, yeah.
Yes. Through the fall, it's snow territory.
And
so-
of course, depending on how many people we have to have a, you know, crew of a couple people, I think at least.
Two at least.
2. And then, you know, so then we have a capacity of 10. The boat would probably hold 50 people before it sunk, but safety first, so 10. And so we're going to have to get a bigger boat or another boat.
Or a second.
Or a second trip.
Or do
Second
two
boat. And I
trips.
think we can do that. When we did the tour, Chris and Alex were able to find a second boat to do the tour with the environmental officials, legislators and whatnot, to go out and look at the environmental, violations. So that may be what we have to do.
I'll just put it out there that we're members of the Port Harbor Boat Club, and so I could get a second boat.
Oh, great. That's
out
great.
if we need it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to give everybody an opportunity to look at their schedule and see what would make, at least for the boat, that seems to be the most pressing of the two, because we would want to do this sooner than later, to just maybe email Sue with our available, whether a Tuesday or a Thursday would work best for us. And is that like ongoing or just next week, you said?
And those are the 2 dates that Bruce gave me.
Just next
He's only
week?
got so many boat captains.
Right, and,
Yeah.
and back to the other tour, I'm gonna have to contact the school, I guess, or we would rent like a 14-passenger van. I don't think that the school bus, which we are very pleased and grateful for the RSU to have given us. It's a great bus, and it's a very striking prison gray bus. But anyway, it's supposed to be blue. But anyhow,
Not that John.
Joe's
wants
great at
it.
a lot of things. Color, not so good. But so I think to have a 14-passenger van would be. They may have something. We may be able to rent something that would enable us to maneuver where we want to take you.
Sure.
And Joe
And I
thinks
think
he knows where
that
he
he'd
can
be a
get
good
one.
tour guide. Yeah.
It's been down every road, probably.
Yeah.
And Joe thinks he knows where he can get a
Oh, he does?
15-passenger, yes.
Okay.
Wyndham Rec has one.
There you go.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
do.
Collaboration,
It's nice.
cooperation. We live
There you
in.
go.
I'm thinking about that duck tour boat that drives through
Yeah.
Portland. We could be all.
That'd be perfect.
Do it all at once.
Fire department used to have one in East Raymond. Duck boat.
And that could serve as the boat too, because it's
Right.
got a propeller on it.
That's right.
So would a during the day for the boat work for folks?
Make it work.
Works for
Try
the
to
tour
make it
guide.
work for
Yeah,
some of
I mean,
us.
Works for
I mean,
us, yeah.
it needs to work for
Tour guide.
Bruce, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
And it has to work for the water. He is going to get me some Saturday
because
days.
the other thing is that we could run up into, let's say Tuesday works the best for most people, that all of a sudden the weather's not great for
Right,
Tuesday.
Exactly.
Could we have both days tentatively? Just a thought, maybe Tuesday works best for, I mean, we probably all cannot fit on the boat, is that correct?
No, we'll have 2 boats.
Oh, we'd have 2 boats, right?
Right. I was going to contact one of the mariners, but it sounds like Jackie has a better
Right,
deal
it's
than
right
that.
at this, I mean, it's right where Marine One takes off from anyway.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, it'd be perfect.
It would all be right there.
So I think if everybody gave a shout out to Sue, as soon as they can look at their schedules, and maybe we can get the most people as possible out, either on Tuesday or Thursday.
So is that a range, did you say 10 to 2?
10 to 3.
10 to 3?
Or he said between 10 and 3.
It's a range,
My guess is
but
you'd
you're
start
gonna-
at 10.
Yes.
It's a range,
And
but
you'd be out.
Should be.
Yeah.
you're going to have time to, depend on, we could load at the marina or we could load at the beach, which is what we did last time, but, and then you got to get out there and, we're going to try to circumnavigate, I guess,
Circumnavigate
the
Raymond
coast,
Cape.
coastline of Raymond, if you will. And that's fairly significant, and you want to, take time to point out certain things, and so it's not going to be.
This is a 3-hour. This is a 3-hour.
I don't know what it was for Gilligan's Island, but it's gonna be.
It was also 3
It's 3 hours. Yeah.
3 hours.
It's not- when we were out just to look at the land use thing, how long were we out there?
Yeah,
We talked in
3 hours.
about 3 hours, yeah.
So
So-
if we were to say maybe like noon to 3,
Yeah,
or something like that,
Yeah.
would be a reasonable expectation for that?
and dress warmly.
Though the earlier we can start, the less rough the water's likely to be.
Yeah.
So if we went 10 to 1, might be better that way, depending on the weather.
We talking next week?
Next week?
Next week, the weather's supposed to be great.
Yeah, it is.
And then I suppose there's no reason why we really couldn't do the same thing for a bus tour, where we sort of throw out
Yes.
some dates.
Because that one is much more open, especially now that the tassel top is winding down. Joe has more time.
Probably somebody could, not me, of course, but a doodle poll or whatever, something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Some
We can throw out maybe a Survey Monkey for that.
Survey monkey, there you go.
I think if we're going to take up a weekday next week, my preference would be that we don't take up another weekday either right away or go for a
For the
weekend.
bus, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Makes sense.
I mean, that could be, you know, into October or even November.
Yeah.
Maybe when leaves are off.
Yes.
even.
Absolutely.
For the bus tour.
Yeah.
If, picking up a little bit on Chris, you know, is from the 60s, you know, growing up in Scarborough, I came up here as a young kid and fishing and so forth, and, you know, even 20 years ago to see what the coastline of Sebago Lake looked like compared to what I remembered when I was young, and now it's much more pronounced, much more striking difference than what it was. And, you know, you're seeing order of magnitude houses that would rival anything that you see on the coast of Maine these days. It's not just, you know, family camps, cottages, and things like it once was predominantly. There are always some big houses, but a lot of small houses and camps and so forth.
Well, 10 years ago, the most expensive house we had in Raymond was around 9 million.
Yeah.
We have one that started 3 years ago that was estimated at 35 million, and I would say it's probably up closer to 50 now because of the rising costs. And we have another one that's going to be in the mid-30s. So people are tearing down $5 and $6 million homes and building 30 to 40
You know,
million.
5-6-year-old homes. And then the other thing, just another little editorial thing, and I applaud Chris and Alex for their work on, you know, identifying and taking action against, you know, violations. Chris and I did a number of them when he was here, and it's going to be very important to pay attention to that moving forward, because there's a new phenomena, and I saw it on the coast, and that's the phenomena of buying a violation, and we can't let that occur.
All right, we do have one person on the Zoom, right? Is that what the little,
We have someone on the phone, but they haven't raised their hand, or
Okay,
I
'cause
don't know who that is.
now would be time, oh wait, set agenda for the next.
Well, that's if no chair was elected,
All right.
and I would like to, if you don't mind.
Now what we do is we would consult with one of you, you tell us who, and we'll, you know,
Yeah. Or do you both want to be called?
we could both
We could do a
contact
conference
you both
call.
and do a conference call.
Want to do that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
I was thinking we could coordinate together.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what we tend to do is I set the agenda the week before, so it'd be
Okay.
the Wednesday before. And we could set up, if you come up with a time that would be good, since it's a conference.
And I guess
call.
for the other members, if there's something that you want to see on the agenda, I don't think it would hurt
Then
to
send it to me. yeah.
send it to Sue. That's how we do kind of how we do the Board of Selectmen agenda.
Makes sense.
What's the process for a planner?
For a planner, well, we'd have to put together an RFP and solicit interested firms or individuals, and do interviews and select somebody. That's a process. But I think the idea that we could do some things before we get a planner, somebody brought that up. Was that you, Peter? And anyways, we can do it simultaneously too. That's a decision you need to make.
Yeah, well, I'd like to get started on that. I think you had laid out a timetable at year end, and I'm like, why do we have to, I mean, I don't think we need to advertise it.
So basically the question is, do you want us to start putting together from the RFPs that we have, a draft RFP? Do you want to make suggestions to us as to what you think ought to be in it, and then we can give a shot at it? Do you want that?
Let's put together a draft,
Yeah, I
and then
think
we
a
can
draft-
react
I think
to
a
it.
draft's a great
Yeah,
idea.
That's a starting
We can
point.
review it.
And then-
Is there any particular one of the examples that I sent out that struck anyone in particular as a good starting point?
I would say not the one that was 50 pages.
Yes.
Yeah, you want this thing
All
to be.
those in favor?
It needs to be, you know, simple but comprehensive enough to get you know, what you need. But I don't think it has to be overly complicated.
Absolutely not, and you have the policy anyway, as far as.
If they have
what's-
experience in a comprehensive plan, we don't have to tell them anything other than we want one.
Right. And then it's going to come down to the interview and selecting somebody. And I don't know if you'll, you know, do that as the whole group, or you have a subcommittee to do preliminary interviews. You have to figure out how you're going to do that whole thing. You know, we normally for municipal positions do 2 interviews, and we have an interview panel for the first one, and then the second one is usually with the HR person and me. But on this one, it may be the whole committee that meets with them, and I don't know if you have a first interview, second interview. I think you have to make sure that you treat everybody equally, fairly. You have a standardized set of questions to some degree. Of course, you can vary as the interview goes, but I think you want to try to make it fair and consistent.
Absolutely.
I know that's your thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, and a deadline is a deadline.
exactly. Right.
So we'll come up with a draft RFP for the next meeting.
Great.
Along with that, would the committee be interested in seeing if Tom from the one-man main planning assistance program could Zoom in to that meeting,
Well, our next meeting, you mean?
to our next meeting, to help with the drafting
Yeah.
of the RFP, because that's where he's, one of his pieces of expertise lies.
Well, we could actually reach out to him, Sue, ourselves and say, you know, we've got these, and what do you consider, you know, what do you think we ought to?
Oh, yes, we could
do
as
something like
well,
that.
but he suggested that it may be good to
Maybe
Zoom
that
in
was
and
something to
talk
do at
with
the
the
staff
committee
level.
as well.
Or if you want, we can have him here, whatever you like.
It might be hard to have a Zoom call with us all, talking to
Yeah.
Tom and trying to get an RFP nailed down. If you pulled together a draft, Sue, and you, I don't know, I think if you guys had a call with him,
Okay.
I feel like that would be a good step
Right. This is-
forward in terms of streamlining it.
Yeah, it's truly, it's like Burger King. You have it your way. Tell us what you want and we'll do it. I mean, we don't, I mean, I do care, but whatever it is you like, we'll do it.
And we no longer have a public for comment.
I see that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess that
I guess
means
get 'em away.
we
Skip.
opened public comment and now we've closed public comment.
Very good.
All right.
Yeah.
So next on the agenda is any of our comments that we would like to add.
Just a follow-up question to what we were just discussing. Is there any reason we can't reach out to the St. Joe's students now before the semester really gets going? I don't know if it's
They
what the
reached out,
position
they
would be.
reached out to me just
Okay.
recently, so I have a contact
Yeah.
person, and I put a student with our beautification group. I think they're looking for those practical experiences now, and I have a person we can go.
I think that sounds like an easy step we could check off and
Yeah, we'll do that.
get some resources right away.
Yes.
Yeah, I just have a comment and a fun fact. So we're going to hear a lot, and we probably have heard a lot in the past about the urban creep or sprawl, having to, protect land, and all of that is valid. But the fun fact is, there's 3.5 million square miles of territory in the continental United States. And 99% of the people in the United States live on less than 8% of that. So that's just as far as thinking about planning and the sense that there is no space to do this.
Could you read those numbers again, Pete? Sorry.
3.5 million square
square
miles on the continental United States.
Good.
And 99% of us live on less than 8% of it. And then the other fun fact just is that, and it just occurred to me as I looked over, but the history behind how we are the home of the landlocked salmon is that the first settlers dammed up the Presumpscot and basically locked the salmon that ran every season that fed the native population here. And when those dams were constructed, their food source went away, and the lake ended up having landlocked salmon. So just I don't know if it's a fun fact, it's a fact.
And most of the lakes in Maine were stocked with salmon from Sebago.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too deep, but I guess the area of Walmart and Lowe's and so forth was, land that was settled by people and taken out of ownership, I guess, from people who had.
Yeah, the chief of the tribe in the 1750s that were here, they were basically from the coast up to Sebago. In 1750, walked to Boston twice to talk to the governor to see about removing the dams. But they said, sorry. So he ended up getting shot on River Road there where the fort was.
They brag about it.
That's
Yeah.
like the guy on the cover there used to run to Boston.
Yeah.
and he used to run up Mount Washington. Was it Welch?
I think it
Edgar
was.
Welch.
Yeah.
Crazy story.
There's also the gentleman supposedly opened up Rattlesnake Mountain so the sun would shine.
Yeah, that's right.
on Collins.
I do like your idea, though, of incorporating something before the, and full disclosure, you know, my family settled in Willard Beach, Willard Square in the late 1600s, so, and they didn't invent the place, they came from elsewhere,
There you go.
Massachusetts
Sure.
and so forth. But anyway, so I think to recognize and to call out that prior history.
Yeah. And I like your term, Don. I think it's really recognition more than anything else. I mean, let's just recognize it, you know?
Right.
It's an acknowledgement.
And we're all part of that problem, by the way, all of us at some level.
You got that right.
Right.
But don't feel bad about it. Just,
I don't.
No.
And I don't want to pick on, was it Colonel Manchester or whatever it is, down in Wyndham?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
No. You know, it's all about, you know, development and moving forward. And that's what it's all about.
Could be a nice set of words for the front matter in the finished document. About a nice polished statement about the Native Americans.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like
It's
an
historically accurate, so we can
acknowledgement.
get it.
Yeah, land acknowledgements.
Land
That's what I'm
acknowledgements,
hearing
yeah.
more and more, that meetings, my wife happens to hold a lot of meetings. And what they've done is just adopted the policy where before, at the beginning of every meeting, they do a land acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement, yeah.
You know, it's just to say, yeah, this is it. This is it.
Well, and I think almost every one of us mentioned the need to care for our resources and our natural resources, and you know, it's something that carries through. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any other further comments? All right, I think at this point I would ask for a motion to adjourn
So moved.
and a second. Okay. All right, so I move to adjourn.
All in favor?
All in favor,
in favor.
sorry. All right, all opposed, would be nobody.